Imagine driving alone on a silent desert road at midnight, your heart heavy with memories you wish you could forget. Suddenly, in the beam of your headlights, you see her, a little girl, barefoot, trembling in a torn hospital gown, clutching nothing but a broken hairbrush. Her lips quiver as she whispers the words that stop your breath. "I'm looking for my mommy." In that moment, everything changes. For years, Cole Harrison, a millionaire CEO, had lived behind walls built of grief and silence. But on that cold Arizona night, a child's fragile voice shattered his armor. What followed was not just an unexpected rescue, but the rebirth of two broken souls finding family in the most unlikely place. This story will remind you that love can be found when you least expect it. Stay with us and subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories for more unforgettable tales. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that pressed against your chest and made every breath feel louder than it should. Cole Harrison sat behind the wheel of his Bentley, the dim glow of the dashboard washing over his face as the desert stretched endlessly around him. The road ahead looked like a black ribbon laid across the barren land, guiding him into a darkness that felt too familiar. The hum of the engine, the faint hiss of the air conditioner, the buzz of his phone vibrating again and again, all of it was just background noise, echoes of a life that seemed to be running on empty. He ignored the phone, let it ring itself into silence. The Tokyo deal could collapse or not, it did not matter tonight. Nothing mattered in those moments except the weight he carried inside. It had been 3 years since Clara's laughter had filled his home. 3 years since her humming floated through the kitchen like sunlight. And yet in that car, her absence still wrapped around him like a shroud. He rubbed his temple, trying to chase away the ache that always found him in the quiet. The world saw him as powerful, untouchable, a man with everything. But in the silence, he knew what he truly had was nothing at all. Then it happened. A flicker across the road, quick and low, too small to be an animal. Cole's grip tightened on the wheel. The shadow grew into something human. He slammed the brakes, the tires screaming against the asphalt, the car jolting sideways. Coffee splattered against the roof, the seat belt cut across his chest, and his heart pounded like it wanted out. When the Bentley finally groaned to a stop, his headlights froze on a figure standing in the middle of the road. She was barefoot, a tiny silhouette trembling in the beam of light. Her hospital gown was torn, her knees scraped raw, dirt streaked across her face and tangled hair. In one fragile hand she clutched a cracked plastic hairbrush as if it were the only thing tethering her to the earth. She looked 7, maybe younger. Her lips were dry, her arms hung lifeless at her sides, her wide eyes hollow and distant. Cole opened the door, the desert air sharp against his skin. His polished shoes crunched on the gravel as he stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a loneliness he recognized too well. He raised his hand slightly, like approaching a frightened bird. "Hey," he said softly, "are you hurt?" The girl did not answer. She just stared as if she was halfway between here and someplace far beyond. For a moment she looked less like a child and more like a ghost. Cole shrugged off his cashmere coat and knelt down to her level. His life had been built on negotiations, on power, on control, but none of that mattered now. What rose in him was instinct, raw, human, unguarded. He held out the coat. "It is okay now," he whispered. "You are safe. Let me help you." Her lips parted just barely, and a voice so faint it nearly disappeared into the wind slipped out. "I am looking for my mommy." The words pierced him, simple and devastating. For years, silence had been his prison, but this child's whisper shattered it. Something cracked open in his chest, a fracture in all the armor he had built since the day Clara's heartbeat had stilled. His throat tightened, his eyes burned, and before he could think, he was wrapping the coat around her small shoulders. She did not resist. She leaned into him, her head resting against his collarbone like it belonged there. She smelled faintly of antiseptic and dust, a mixture of hospital corridors and lonely roads. Cole lifted her gently and carried her back to the warmth of the car. She curled into the coat, clutching her hairbrush with both hands as if it held her last piece of the world she had lost. He cranked the heat, placed her carefully in the passenger seat, and reached for his phone. His fingers trembled as he dialed. "There is a little girl," he said when the dispatcher answered. "She is alone on Highway 89 near mile marker 77. Please send someone now." The girl's eyelids fluttered open, her gaze unfocused but heavy with something far older than her years. "I did not mean to get lost," she whispered. "I just kept walking." Cole swallowed hard, his voice unsteady as he replied, "You are not lost anymore. I found you." The headlights glared ahead, the engine hummed, but for the first time in years he was not thinking of business, not thinking of the empty mansion waiting for him in Sedona. He was thinking only of this girl, her fragile frame, her whispered words, and the impossible weight she carried in her silence. When the ambulance lights painted the night in flashes of red, Cole expected her to let go. He expected the professionals to take over, expected her to vanish into the system like so many other children. But when they tried to separate her from him, she clung tighter, her fingers gripping his sleeve with surprising strength. "You are coming too, right?" she said, her voice desperate in a way that tore through him. Cole did not hesitate. "Yes," he promised, "I am not going anywhere." The paramedics exchanged a look, then nodded. "She trusts him," one said quietly. "Let him ride along." Her name was Sophie. She whispered it like a secret when asked, holding the hairbrush close to her chest. In the back of the ambulance, she leaned against Cole, eyelids heavy, body fragile but no longer entirely alone. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face and whispered words he had not spoken to anyone in years. "I have got you." The hospital air was sharp with disinfectant and the echo of hurried footsteps, but inside room 409 the world slowed. Machines beeped steadily beside Sophie's bed. Her knees were bandaged, her feet wrapped, her small frame hidden beneath layers of blankets. She had not said much to anyone since arriving, not to the nurses, not to the social worker. But to Cole, she whispered fragments, as if he was the only one allowed into her fragile world. He sat in a stiff chair by her side, jacket gone, sleeves rolled, ignoring the endless calls buzzing across his phone. The world was demanding his attention, but for the first time he could not bring himself to care. Sophie clutched his coat like a shield, and when a nurse tried to move it aside, she clung tighter. Her lips barely moved, but the words were clear. He said he would stay. And so he did. Through the long hours of the night, through the uncertainty of who she was or where she had come from, through the ache that whispered he was crossing a line he could never uncross. He stayed because she had asked him to, because in her silence he recognized his own. And for Cole Harrison, the man who once had everything but nothing at all, staying felt like the first real choice he had made in years. The hospital walls seemed to hum with the same rhythm as the machines that kept track of Sophie's heartbeat. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic, the kind that clung to the air no matter how many times the nurses passed through. Sophie lay quietly beneath the blanket, her small hands gripping the soft folds of Cole's coat like it was armor. She had barely spoken, just a few whispers that dissolved into the sterile air, but every time she looked toward him, her eyes seemed to say more than words could manage. Cole had never been good at waiting. His life had been measured in quick decisions, rapid deals, moments that demanded instant control. Yet here he was, sitting in a stiff plastic chair for hours unmoving because she had asked him to stay. His phone buzzed relentlessly from the windowsill, messages piling up, the Tokyo deal unraveling by the minute. He ignored them all. For once, the empire he had built could collapse without him. What mattered was the fragile child lying in front of him. The doctors spoke in calm tones, discussing tests, vitals, possible trauma, but their voices blurred into background noise. He only focused when Sophie stirred, her fingers twitching slightly, her lips pressing against the fabric of his coat. When a nurse leaned over and gently tried to shift the blanket, Sophie's grip tightened. Her voice, thin and cracked, filled the room. He said he would stay. The words cut through everything, the nurse's hesitation, Cole's exhaustion, the hum of the machines. He rose immediately, stepping to her side. "It is okay," he said softly. "I am still here." Miss Lane, the social worker with silver curls and kind but firm eyes, visited soon after. She carried a clipboard heavy with forms and a voice that had repeated the same lines hundreds of times before. "No records," she explained. "No identification, no guardianship claims. For now, she will need a foster placement." Cole barely registered her words. His eyes stayed on Sophie, who was stacking sugar and salt packets from her untouched meal tray into a fragile tower. She pointed to each one in silence before flicking one away. "That was Mommy. This was me. This was our car. Now it is just this one." The simplicity of her gesture broke something in him. He had lost Clara, but Sophie had lost more than he could imagine. She had not cried, had not screamed. Instead, she carried her grief in silence, in small whispers, in the careful stacking of condiment packets. Cole understood that silence because he had lived it for 3 years. And maybe, just maybe, he could teach her that silence did not have to last forever. When Miss Lane mentioned the word foster, Sophie's eyes flicked toward him. She did not say anything, but the way her fingers gripped his coat again told him everything. Before he could think, he heard his own voice. "She asked me to stay," he said, his words rough, almost pleading. Miss Lane studied him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "And would you?" she asked. Cole hesitated, then nodded once. "Yes." That night, Cole tried to rest in the visitors' lounge outside Sophie's room, but sleep would not come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw hers, gray, hollow, far too old for her age. He thought of Clara again, of the way she had looked in her final weeks, fading into silence. The weight of it pressed down until he sat upright, wide awake, his heart torn between the man he had been and the man Sophie was asking him to become. He had never considered himself anyone's savior, but she was clinging to him as if he was the only thing left in her world. By morning, the decision was made. He signed the papers Miss Lane placed in front of him, initiating emergency custody. He knew it was only temporary, filled with legal hurdles and background checks, but for him it was already permanent. He was not going to let her vanish into another stranger's house, another unfamiliar silence. He was going to stay. When he brought Sophie home for the first time, the house seemed to echo louder than usual. The villa on the hillside had always been too big, designed for grandeur rather than comfort. Marble floors reflected footsteps like drumbeats, high ceilings carried whispers into nothing. He guided her inside, her small figure dwarfed by the glass walls and towering artwork. She clutched her hairbrush tightly, her eyes scanning the rooms as though expecting ghosts behind every door. "Are you hungry?" Cole asked, forcing a smile. "I can make grilled cheese." She did not answer. Instead, she whispered something sharper, something that cut through his chest. "Where do I sleep?" The question haunted him. For years, one room had remained untouched, a place sealed away like a grave. It was meant to be a nursery once, later a guest room, but after Clara's death, it had become a locked door he could not face. Now, standing before it with Sophie at his side, the weight of the key in his hand felt almost unbearable. He hesitated, then turned the lock. The room was bare, dust hanging in the sunlight. But within hours, movers filled it with life. A bed with soft linens, a pink lamp shaped like a bunny, a shelf of picture books, stuffed animals, and a canopy tent glowing with fairy lights. The transformation was almost unreal. Cole stood in the doorway, uncertain, watching as Sophie walked inside. She touched the stuffed elephant, brushed her fingers over the rug, and finally sat cross-legged on the bed. Her voice was small, hesitant. "Is this just for tonight?" "No," Cole said, his throat tight. "It is yours as long as you want it." Miss Lane returned later with more paperwork, reminding him of the system's demands. Sophie remained quiet, but when the woman left, Cole found her sitting in her room, staring at the framed papers he had placed by her nightstand. "Emergency foster authorization," her name printed clearly. She pointed at it. "What does that mean?" she asked. Cole knelt beside her and traced the words with his finger. "It means you are safe here. It means this is real." That night she whispered 3 words onto index cards and placed them carefully on her dresser. Safe, PANCAKES, forever. They were not drawings. But they were something stronger, her way of saying she believed him. Cole stood in the doorway, reading them in silence, and for the first time in years, he felt the faint, unfamiliar weight of hope. The days that followed were quiet but never truly still. Life in Cole's house began to shift in ways that no quarterly report or boardroom decision could explain. It started with small things: the sound of tiny footsteps across the marble floors, the scent of pancakes clinging to the kitchen long after breakfast, the faint hum of Sophie's voice as she whispered stories to her stuffed elephant. What was once a home built for silence was slowly becoming something softer, something alive. But healing did not come easily. Sophie carried her grief in ways that could not always be seen. Some nights Cole woke to muffled cries drifting through the hallway. He would find her curled on the floor of her room, knees tucked to her chest, Captain the elephant clutched in her arms. He never forced words from her, never demanded she explain. Instead, he would sit with her in the dim glow of her nightlight until her breathing slowed, repeating only the same promise: "You are safe. You are home. That is enough." Therapy sessions with Miss Darling helped in gentle ways. Sophie rarely spoke at first, answering questions with nods or shrugs. But slowly, her voice began to return, tentative and fragile. She whispered the name of a puppet, then offered short sentences, as if testing whether the world was ready to hear her again. Cole watched from the doorway, his chest aching with pride each time she allowed even the smallest word to escape. When she placed one of the story cards from therapy on her nightstand beside her hairbrush, it felt like a declaration. She was not disappearing anymore. Yet Sophie still refused to draw. Crayons, pencils, markers, she pushed them all aside. "Drawing is for happy kids," she said once, her tone so calm that it cut deeper than tears ever could. Miss Darling explained that some children could not bear to put their memories on paper because it made them too real. Cole did not argue. Instead, he let her choose her own way of expressing herself. And in time, her words began to fill the house. At first, she left small notes around the kitchen. "Do not forget lunch. Captain needs a bath." Later, she began to type stories on the old family laptop, her block letters slowly forming sentences, then paragraphs. Her first story she titled "The Car That Did Not Keep Driving." It was about a little girl lost on a dark road and the man who stopped, who stayed, who saw her. Cole printed it, framed it, and hung it above her bed. She did not say much when she noticed it, but that night she slept with the faintest smile on her lips. School brought new challenges. Sophie clung to his hand on the first day, her backpack almost too big for her small shoulders. "What if they ask who you are?" she whispered. Cole crouched to her level, meeting her eyes. "What do you want to say I am?" She thought for a moment before answering softly. "You are the man with the pancakes." He laughed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That will work." But children can be cruel without meaning to. When a classmate told her he was not her real father, the words struck her harder than any playground shove. She stopped speaking for 2 days, her silence heavier than ever before. Cole's anger simmered, not at the boy but at the reminder that truth could still wound her. The next morning, he hung her foster authorization papers in a frame beside her bookshelf. "This proves what is real," he told her. That night he found new words taped to her dresser: "Safe, PANCAKES, forever." As weeks turned into months, a rhythm grew between them. They cooked breakfast together, sometimes burning the pancakes, sometimes laughing until tears blurred their eyes. They visited the local fair, where Sophie chose the purple horse on the carousel and laughed so hard it made Cole's chest ache. She began to trust that he would be there when she turned around, that his promises were not empty ones. The day Miss Lane arrived with news of Sophie's biological mother left Cole speechless. The woman was alive but had relinquished her rights without a word, without asking about her daughter. Sophie was outside picking flowers when the truth was spoken inside. Cole's chest tightened, not with anger but with the hollow ache of knowing that a child had been abandoned twice. That evening, he canceled every meeting, every call. He took Sophie to the fairgrounds instead, where the night spun with laughter, sugar, and the simple magic of being seen. By the time the adoption hearing came, Cole had already made his choice. He dressed in his best suit, his tie a gift once given by Clara, and looked at himself in the mirror. For years, his reflection had shown a man carved out of grief and loneliness. Now he saw something else: a father. Sophie stood beside him in her red dress, her small hands clutching Captain and Mr. Tumble, her eyes carrying a spark of something he thought he would never see again: hope. The courtroom was simple, sunlight streaming through the windows, shelves lined with children's books. Judge Matthews asked Sophie if she understood what adoption meant. She nodded. "It means I have a forever," she whispered. And when asked if she had anything else to say, she leaned close to Cole's ear. "I still do not know how to draw, but if I did, I would draw you as my heart." The words undid him. Tears he had locked away for years broke free, spilling down his face in front of strangers, but it did not matter. For the first time, he was not ashamed of his grief. Sophie wiped one tear with her thumb and whispered, "Do not be sad. We are not lost anymore." The gavel struck, and Sophie Bennett became Sophie Harrison. When they stepped outside, autumn sunlight poured over them, warm and forgiving. Neighbors who had once whispered about the reclusive man on the hill gathered with flowers and smiles. Children ran across his lawn, filling the air with laughter. Sophie twirled in her red dress, her arms stretched wide like a flag of victory. Cole watched her, the adoption decree folded carefully in his pocket, and realized that this was what it meant to be alive again. That night, after the guests had gone and the house was quiet once more, Sophie curled beside him on the porch swing. "Does it still count as family if we did not start that way?" she asked softly. He put his arm around her, his voice steady. "Family is what you build, and I would build this 1,000 times over." She closed her eyes with a sigh, and in that moment Cole knew the silence that had haunted him for years had finally been replaced. The house was no longer empty. It was home. There are moments in life when a single decision reshapes everything. For Cole Harrison, it was the night he stopped his car on a lonely desert road. He could have kept driving, he could have told himself it was not his problem, but instead he chose to stay. And in that choice, two lives that had been carved apart by loss began to stitch themselves together. Sophie had been left with nothing but silence, a broken hairbrush, and a fragile voice asking for a mother who never came. Cole had been living with his own silence, a house filled with echoes of a love he thought he had lost forever. Together, they found a way forward, not by erasing the past, but by learning that broken pieces can still build something whole. What makes their story so powerful is not wealth or circumstance, but the courage to open a door that had been closed for too long. Cole could have remained the man behind glass walls and business empires. Sophie could have disappeared into a system that often forgets children like her. Instead, they chose each other. He became more than a man who stopped his car. He became a father. She became more than a lost child. She became his home. Their journey reminds us that family is not only blood, but the bonds we create when we refuse to let someone walk alone. It is in whispered promises at midnight, in burnt pancakes that still taste like love, in the way a child can turn a house into a place of laughter again. It is in the courage to say, "I am not going anywhere," and mean it. This is not just a story about adoption. It is a story about redemption, about second chances, about the way love finds us when we least expect it. It tells us that even in our darkest nights, there is always a chance for light to break through. Sophie and Cole remind us that sometimes we save others, and sometimes, without even realizing it, they save us too. If this story touched your heart, let it stay with you. Let it remind you that kindness still matters, that choosing to stop, to see, to stay can change a life. And if you believe in stories like this, stories of healing, resilience, and the power of love, we invite you to be part of this journey with us. Subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories, where every tale carries an echo of hope waiting to be heard. Because the next story might be the one your heart has been waiting for.